Hey, are you concerned that your child may be delayed in the area of vocabulary? Hopefully you saw our video where we talked about the 5 areas of language, and today we're going to be talking about that specific area of vocabulary, or the area of semantics. Don't go away. Welcome back to Lingaroo, where language comes to life. Hopefully you saw our video a few weeks ago where we talked about the 5 different areas of language, both the understanding of language and then also as we think about the expressive language or the output. And as promised in that video, we're going to today start a 5-video series where we take each week a closer look and dive deeper into each of those categories of language. So if you haven't seen that video, you're going to want to go back and check that out. So as we think about this area of semantics or vocabulary, we're not just the nouns or the labels, and we're going to talk about that in a minute, but just all of these areas, we think of it kind of as like the word bank, right? If you remember those fill-in-the-blank sentences as a child and you had the word bank down below, there may have been nouns or verbs or adjectives or adverbs, all of those concepts, those labels for things were in our word bank. And that's kind of how I want you to think about this area of semantics or vocabulary for your kiddo. It's kind of that word bank or their repertoire of words. In our video where we talked about the speech and language strategies or those stimulation strategies, where we talked about the self-talk, the parallel talk, and the expansions, you'll remember that I said it's not just labeling, right? That I don't want you just pointing to things and labeling. Well, I want to be sure that you understood that and heard that correctly. If you remember in 8th grade grammar class or maybe junior high English, we had this idea given to us or talked about and taught to us about a double negative, that you would never say a sentence, I don't want no spaghetti, right? The don't and the no, they kind of contradict each other, and it's what's called a double negative. Well, in our house, we love the double negative, almost as a comic relief. Sometimes we hear it. Sometimes my oldest son, I'll say, so, hey, are you having a good time? And he'll say, well, I'm not having a good time, right? So it's kind of this, he doesn't want me to think he is having a good time, but he's not having a bad time. So he'll say he's not having a good time. So that's kind of what I want to think about with labeling. It's not that we're not labeling, right? So you're not labeling. You are labeling. In fact, we're labeling anything and everything that we can see. But the emphasis that I want to draw to that sentence that I said was that we're not just labeling, right? I want you to move beyond labeling. We want to go beyond just talking about the object label. We want to talk about the part-whole relationships. If we've got a car, we're talking about the door on the car. If we're stirring with the spoon, I'm holding the handle of the spoon, or the stuffed animal, the nose of the dog. Whatever it is, talking about the object, but then also thinking about other aspects of that label as well, or of that object. Okay, so you are labeling, and in fact, we're labeling as much as we can, as often as we can, with as much description as we can. Which brings me to my next point. The next thing I want you to think about is to describe. Okay, so we're going to label and then we're going to describe. This is easiest, I think, when we think about the idea of expansions or that strategy of expansions. I'll give you an example. My son, when he was little, he would say caca for cracker. That was his word. It's one of his first words that he learned. He loved the crackers. And every time he would say it, I would affirm him. Oh, you want some crackers? Do you want them in the bowl? Let's put the crackers in the bowl. So much so that he actually learned this idea that to request crackers, it wasn't enough to just say crackers. And so his utterance, his request quickly became caca in the bowl, right? And he would combine crackers in the bowl. This concept of not only this label, but putting a location, right? So as you're thinking about describing these objects in your child's environment, Where are they located? What's the size, the shape, the quantity? There are all of these descriptors that we can use that can take this label to the next level and up the ante a little bit for our children as we're doing this labeling and moving it into describing. Okay, so the third thing I want you to think about is comparing, right? So we're labeling, we're describing, and we're comparing. How are objects the same? Do they have the same size? Do they have the same look? Do they have the same feel? Are they the same weight? And talking about how they are the same. Another example, when my kiddo was little, we were at the store and he had one of those balance bikes, right? So the kind where it doesn't have any pedals and you just kind of use your feet to propel you along. And he loved that little bike. But he also saw some bigger kids at the park one day and he noticed their bikes were different. They had a kickstand. And he was super frustrated. Why didn't his have a kickstand? He wanted a kickstand, and it was quite the topic of discussion for some time. So much so that one day he and I were at the department store and he ran out ahead of me as kids often do. And he found a shoe, a high heel shoe. And he said, "Mom, it has a kickstand." And I thought, what a cute comparison, right? And he was so used to, in our world, comparing that things look similar. And look, this looks like this. And oh, wow, we're talking about this. And that's what he was doing. He picked up this high heel shoe and was comparing it to this bike and this part of the bike that he so desperately wanted. Coupled with that, or in conjunction with that, as we're comparing objects, how are they the same? We also want to talk about how they are different, right? Is one heavy? Is one light? Oh, look, mine's super light. Let me try yours. Oh, yours is heavier, right? So using some of those comparison words, those ERs. Oh, mine's the biggest, right? The what we call the superlative or the ESTs that we can add to things, right? So you're comparing, you're contrasting. Again, if you saw that video about the 5 areas of language, we talked about synonyms and antonyms, words that mean the same, and then these concepts that are completely different, day and night, black and white, right? So we want to bring those in, again, as we're labeling and we're describing, we're comparing, and we're contrasting, and we're teaching these children so many different concepts of language rather than just sticking with labeling it for what the label is. Okay, and then finally, the 5th thing, I want you to categorize. I'm sure you're familiar with, if you've ever had a child in preschool, or if you can think back to maybe when you were in preschool, this idea of categories or this idea of units, right? In preschools, they often teach in units. They do a unit on the farm, or maybe around the holidays, they do a unit on Thanksgiving, and they teach around that theme or around that unit. And there's a reason for that. It helps children, as we talk about things in categories, as we talk about things in groups, it helps them to kind of put things together, to kind of add some context, and to put things in the correct bin or the correct file folder. Sometimes I think about, for our kiddos, a filing cabinet, right? And if you were trying to find the word, we talked about word finding difficulties. Kids who talk in a lot of generalities, they say things like stuff or things, like I just did, right? And as they're going to try to find the correct word to use in a given situation or a given sentence, they have trouble finding it. And it's often because those categories, their folders, aren't as solid. They aren't as exact or concrete as maybe they need to be. It's almost as if somebody took their filing cabinet and flipped it up on end and shook it upside down and then put it back down and said, "All right, here you go. Find me cow," or whatever the label is, right? And they're trying to think about it. They're trying to, oh, what was that word? I can't remember. Oh, it's that thing. So rather than being able to access that exact word, they either talk around it or they just use another word, like I said, like stuff. Okay, so as we help them to build better categories, as we talk about how things belong, maybe they're in this group, they're animals. Well, within animals, we have farm animals and zoo animals, right? We have pets. that we have here in the house that are different, or oh, those are animals we find out in the jungle. Those are jungle animals, right? So that when a child is trying to think of the word cow, they may not remember the word cow, but they may remember, oh, it was on the farm, right? And it helps them as they access those groups, as they access those categories, it helps them get closer and closer to the word they're trying to find. Okay? So guys, that's it for today. As you think about this area of semantics, I want you to be thinking about label, describe, compare, contrast, categorize. It's almost like a little jingle here. Label, describe, compare, contrast, categorize. Right? So now that I've got you bebopping and singing throughout the rest of your day, be thinking about this as you're making dinner. Be thinking about this as you're interacting and engaging with your child. How can you label? How can you describe it and take it to the next level? Can you compare it to something else? Can you contrast it with something nearby? And can you categorize it and talk about what group it belongs in? And make it fun and make this language come to life for your child. So guys, if you haven't already, click right here to subscribe to this channel. Click that bell icon so you'll get notifications every time we upload new videos. Click here to see the video I've been talking about the 5 different areas of language. Thanks for joining us, and I'll see you next time here at Lingaroo, where language comes to life.